The Consul ignored Earth's warning. Now every armada that entered is gone. The vote was close but decisive. Despite protests from more cautious species, the Consul authorized a third military expedition to Sol system. This time, however, they would follow different protocols. No energy weapons, no quantum shields, no active sensor arrays. The Third Armada would carry biological weapons, kinetic impactors, and radiation bombs, all designed to sterilize Earth's surface without triggering spatial anomalies. It was cold logic. If humans could live safely in Sol system, then removing humans would make the system safe for colonization. Consul Director Vexithorian abstained from the vote. He sat in his chambers afterward, staring at casualty reports from the first two armadas. Over 1,000 ships lost, hundreds of thousands dead or trapped in spatial tiers, all because he had not believed a simple warning. He sent his resignation to the Consul leadership that evening. Whether they accepted it or not no longer mattered to him. On Earth, in the capital city of Seoul, the Emergency Defense Council convened in a bunker 3 kilometers underground. Ambassador Hyun-woo stood before a wall-sized display showing the Third Armada's composition. 400 ships carefully selected for minimal energy signatures. The fleet was already in transit, scheduled to reach Sol system in 5 days. "We should evacuate the inner system," suggested General Kwan, a stern woman with iron-gray hair. "Get everyone to Mars and beyond. If they are coming with biological weapons, Earth's population is at risk." "Evacuating 5 billion people in 5 days is impossible," replied Minister Choi, head of civil defense. "Even if we had enough ships, which we don't, the panic alone would kill millions." Dr. Ji-won stood and approached the display. She looked exhausted. "It may not matter. The Third Armada is coming in cold, but they are still coming with hostile intent. They may not trigger the breaches as quickly, but they will trigger them eventually." "Are you certain?" General Kwan asked. "No," Ji-won admitted. "We have never seen an approach like this. They might penetrate deeper into the system before the breaches respond. They might reach Earth orbit." She paused. "But intent matters. They are coming here to kill us all. The breaches will recognize that." Hyun-woo made the decision. "We evacuate non-essential personnel from the inner system. Anyone who can leave, leaves, but most people will shelter in place. We broadcast one final warning to the Armada. Then we prepare to record everything." He looked around the room. "And we pray they turn back before it is too late." The warning was transmitted on all frequencies. Ambassador Hyun-woo recorded it personally, standing in the same Seoul bunker, looking directly into the camera with tired, sad eyes. "This is Ambassador Hyun-woo of Earth. To the incoming fleet you were warned. You were educated. We have shown you evidence and testimony. We have shared our research. We cannot stop you from entering our system, but neither can we save you from your choice. Please turn back. There is no victory here, only loss." The transmission was received by the Third Armada's command ship, the Carrier Judgment. Fleet Admiral Thexvar played the message for his senior officers, then deleted it from the communication logs. "Psychological warfare," he declared. "They are desperate and trying to frighten us. We proceed as planned." On Mars, at the primary military academy, a young recruit named Jun-sik received emergency deployment orders. He was 19 years old and had been in training for only 6 months. Now he was being assigned to a monitoring station on Mars's moon Phobos, where he would observe and record the incoming Armada's approach. His hands shook as he packed his gear. His commander, Lieutenant Hae-won, found him in the barracks. She was older, maybe 35, with the calm demeanor of someone who had seen combat. "Nervous?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Jun-sik admitted. "I have never seen real combat. Never seen an enemy fleet." "You won't see combat today," Hae-won said. "We are observers. We record." "That is our mission." She sat beside him. "The enemy is not the aliens, Jun-sik. The enemy is ignorance. Theirs and ours. We watch so that future generations will know what happened here." "What if they succeed?" Jun-sik asked quietly. "What if they reach Earth and deploy their weapons?" Hae-won was quiet for a moment. "Then we will die knowing we tried to prevent this. That is all anyone can do." The Third Armada crossed into Sol system 4 days later. They came in cold, just as planned. Engines at minimal power, weapons unpowered, shields offline. They drifted more than flew, using momentum and gravity to move inward. It was the slowest approach any military fleet had ever attempted, but Fleet Admiral Thexvar was patient and thorough. They passed the Kuiper Belt without incident. No spatial anomalies appeared. No ships vanished. Thexvar allowed himself cautious optimism. Humanity's warnings had been based on armadas that entered aggressively. By entering peacefully, by looking unthreatening, his fleet was avoiding the trigger that destroyed the others. On Phobos Station, recruit Junsik watched the armadas approach through optical telescopes and passive sensors. The ships were visible as tiny points of light moving against the background stars. Lieutenant Haywan stood beside him, her face expressionless. Other observers worked at their stations, recording data, tracking positions, maintaining communication with Mars Command. "They're being careful this time," Junsik observed. "Yes," Haywan agreed. "But they are still coming to kill us." Careful or not, that intent remains. The third armada passed Neptune's orbit, then Uranus, then Saturn, where maintenance worker Tae Hyun watched them drift past his station. He was alone on the observation deck, having sent the rest of his crew to safety on Titan. He could have gone with them, but he felt compelled to stay, to witness what was about to happen. Some part of him needed to remember these people, even if they came as enemies. The Armada reached Jupiter's orbit and maintained formation. Fleet Admiral Thexvar reviewed the approach plan one final time. They would reach Mars orbit in 30 hours. Then Earth 6 hours after that. Deployment of biological weapons would commence immediately. The entire operation would be complete within 12 hours. Sol system would be sterilized, ready for colonization once the spatial phenomenon was properly studied and contained. "Sir," his sensor officer called, "I am detecting minor spatial fluctuations, similar to what the second Armada reported, but much smaller." "How many?" Thexvar demanded. 3, no 6. Now 12. "Sir, they are multiplying. The tears are spreading." Thexvar felt cold certainty settle in his chest. "All ships prepare for emergency faster than light retreat. Navigation, plot exit vectors immediately." But even as he gave the orders, he knew it was too late. The tears were not just spreading, they were erupting. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. The fabric of space throughout the inner system seemed to split open like overripe fruit, revealing darkness beneath. On Phobos Station, Junsik watched his displays in horror. The Armada's neat formation dissolved as ships tried to maneuver away from the expanding tiers. But there was nowhere to go. The anomalies were everywhere now, appearing in every direction, creating a web of spatial ruptures that enclosed the entire fleet. "Lieutenant," Junsik said, his voice shaking, "the tiers. They are not just around the Armada. They are spreading toward Mars, toward us." Haywan checked her own displays and felt her blood turn to ice. The tiers were indeed spreading outward from the Armada's position, expanding in waves like ripples on a pond. They were growing exponentially faster than anything humanity had ever recorded. Within minutes, they would reach Mars orbit. Within an hour, they would engulf Earth itself. "This is different," Haywan whispered. "We have never provoked them this badly. 3 armadas, thousands of ships. The breaches are not just defending anymore, they are purging." In the middle of the third armada, Fleet Admiral Thexvar watched his fleet disintegrate. Ships did not vanish this time. Instead, they merged with the spatial tiers themselves, becoming part of the broken fabric of spacetime. Hull plating flowed like liquid into impossible angles. Crew members trapped in those ships remained alive, suspended in the tiers, their screams eternal but silent in the void. The carrier Judgment lurched as a tier opened directly beneath it. Thexvar felt the ship begin to slide into the rupture, felt reality itself bending around him. His last thought was not of tactics or honor, but of regret. The humans had told the truth. They had warned his people 3 times, and pride had killed them all. On Earth in the Sol bunker, Dr. Jiwan stared at her readings with growing panic. The tears are cascading. They are feeding on each other, growing exponentially. At this rate, they will consume the entire inner system within 6 hours. Can we stop it? General Kwan demanded. "I don't know," Jiwan shouted, her composure finally breaking. "We have never seen this before. We kept them calm by existing here, by being native. But the armadas looked like infections, like threats that needed to be purged. Now the system's immune response is killing everything, including us." Ambassador Hyunwoo sat down heavily in a chair. "We were the antibodies," he said quietly. "We kept them calm by being here, by belonging. And now they think the whole system is infected. They are trying to sterilize everything." On Phobos Station, alarms began to wail. A spatial tier was forming just 50 kilometers from the station's position. Trapped in recursive time, experiencing the same seconds forever, only one ship escaped. A small scout vessel, the Consul, ignored Earth's warning. Now every armada that entered is gone. The emergency session was different this time. There was no shouting, no accusations. The representative sat in stunned silence as the scout pilot's testimony played on the main display. Her voice shook as she described watching 463 warships destroyed or transformed by spatial phenomena that seemed to target them deliberately. The recording showed her face pale and haunted, eyes that had seen things no living being should witness. When the testimony ended, the chamber remained quiet. Finally, a representative from the Merchant Coalition spoke, her voice careful. Ambassador Hyunwoo, the Consul formally requests your presence and your expertise. We need to understand what is happening in your system. Hyunwoo entered the chamber flanked by two others. Dr. Ji-won carried a data tablet, her expression professional but tired. Captain Min Seo wore her Earth Defense Forces uniform, the silver insignia marking her as commander of humanity's deep space research vessel, Horizon. They stood before the Consul, and for the first time in 2 months the alien representatives looked at humans without contempt or dismissal. They looked with something closer to fear. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us, the Merchant Coalition representative said. We have lost over 600 ships and thousands of lives. We need answers. Hyunwoo nodded slowly. We have been trying to give you answers since the beginning. Are you ready to listen now? Consul Director Vexithorian sat in his chair, diminished somehow, his scales dull. He had lost political support after the Second Armada's destruction. Many called for his resignation. He gestured weakly for Hyunwoo to continue. Dr. Ji-won stepped forward and activated her data tablet. A holographic display materialized above the console table, showing Sol system in 3 dimensions. Small red markers appeared throughout, concentrated near the inner planets but scattered across the entire system. These are spatial anomalies. We call them breaches. They are points where the fabric of space-time is thin, weak. Something on the other side presses against our reality here. What is on the other side? A delegate asked. We don't know, Ji-won admitted. We have been studying them for 50 years and we still don't understand what they are or where they lead. We only know they exist and they respond to certain stimuli. She changed the display to show energy readings. The breaches are normally dormant. They are there, always present but inactive. However, they respond to specific patterns. Foreign objects entering the system with high energy signatures, aggressive intent patterns, weapon systems, shield frequencies. They seem to recognize threat behaviors. Captain Min Seo took over the presentation. 50 years ago, when humanity first developed deep system scanning technology, we discovered the breaches by accident. We sent a colony ship to establish a base on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The ship had 15,000 people aboard. It vanished without a trace. The chamber was absolutely silent. Min Seo continued, her voice steady but sad. We sent military response teams, state-of-the-art warships with full weapons and defensive systems active. We lost 3 more ships, 10,000 more people. Then we sent automated probes with minimal power signatures. They survived. That's when we started to understand the pattern. The breaches ignore native objects, Ji-won explained. Anything that evolved in this system, anything that has always been here, moves freely. Asteroids, comets, the planets themselves, and they ignore objects that belong to the system now. Human ships, stations, and equipment register as native because we have been here long enough, and we move with specific energy patterns. But foreign objects? Another delegate asked. Foreign objects are noticed, Ji-won said, especially if they enter with aggressive configurations. Your armadas came in with weapons charged, shields at maximum, sensor arrays doing active deep scans. You looked like threats. You looked like infections trying to invade the system, and the breaches responded. She displayed sensor recordings from the first Armada's destruction. The delegates watched as ships simply ceased to exist, pulled into tiers in space that appeared from nothing. The breaches don't just destroy. They consume, they transform, they trap. We have recovered some victims over the years. What we found suggests they exist in spaces between normal reality. Time does not function the same way there. Either does physics. A long silence followed. Finally, an elderly delegate from a species that valued logic above all else spoke. How did humanity survive the initial discovery? You said you lost ships. Why didn't the breaches consume all of you? Captain Minseo answered. Because we learned to be careful. After the first losses, we changed our approach. We sent ships with minimal power. No weapons active. No aggressive scanning. We moved slowly, respectfully, as if we were guests in a place that did not belong to us. She paused. And we learned to be patient. It took us 30 years to understand the patterns well enough to move safely throughout our own system. We lost 30,000 people in those 30 years. Hyunwoo added quietly. Scientists, soldiers, colonists, miners. 30,000 lives to learn what we tried to teach you in a single message. The weight of those words settled over the chamber. Vexthorian finally spoke, his voice hollow. You were trying to protect us. Yes, Hyunwoo said simply. We know what it is to lose people to the breaches. We know the grief, the confusion, the horror. We did not want that for anyone else. That is why we warned you. That is why we have been so insistent about keeping your ships away. Another delegate spoke up, this one representing a warrior culture. But if you know the patterns, if you know how to move safely, why not share that information? Why not guide our ships through? Because it does not work that way, Jiwon said. The breaches recognize native versus foreign at a fundamental level. It is not about following rules. It is about belonging. Your ships will never belong here no matter how carefully they move. The risk will always exist. Then what do you propose? The Merchant Coalition representative asked. Sol system sits on a major trade route. Your warning asks us to avoid it entirely. That means adding weeks or months to travel times. Yes, Hyunwoo agreed. We understand the inconvenience. But the alternative is what you have already seen. More deaths, more losses. The breaches do not negotiate. They do not care about trade routes or diplomatic considerations. Consul Director Vexithorian stood slowly. He looked old now, beaten. I must ask a difficult question, Ambassador. If your system is so dangerous, why do you remain? Why not evacuate? Let the phenomenon have the system. Hyunwoo met his eyes. Because it is our home. Because we were born there. Because at some level we cannot fully explain we belong to that system and it accepts us. We did not choose to live beside something dangerous and incomprehensible. We simply had the misfortune to evolve there. But it is still our home and we will not abandon it. There was a long silence. Then Vexithorian said something unexpected. I was wrong. I did not believe you. I thought humanity was trying to appear stronger than you were. I sent thousands to their deaths because of my pride. He looked around the chamber. We owe humanity an apology, and we owe our people honesty about what exists in Sol system. But even as he spoke, another delegate stood, a younger politician from a militant species. With respect, Consul Director, I believe we need more information before making permanent decisions. We have only humanity's word about these breaches. Perhaps a third expedition, properly prepared with this new knowledge, could verify. No, Hyunwoo said, his voice sharp. No more armadas, no more expeditions, no more tests. We have given you the truth. We have shown you the evidence. If you send more ships, more people will die, and we will not be responsible for that. But he could see it in their faces. Some of them were already planning. Pride and fear and political necessity were already turning the wheels. They would not believe, not fully, until they had tried for themselves. Until they had lost even more. Dr. Jiwon saw it too. She added one more piece of information, her voice urgent. There is something else you need to know. The breaches are spreading. We have detected similar spatial anomalies forming in 17 other systems along major trade routes. Weak points in spacetime, just like in Sol system. They are not as developed yet, but they are growing. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted questions. Jiwon raised her voice. We don't know why. We don't know if they are connected to our breaches, or if this is a separate phenomenon. But the pattern is clear. Wherever there is heavy traffic, wherever ships constantly enter and exit normal space, wherever weapons testing and large-scale military operations occur, the fabric of reality is becoming thinner. Are you saying our activities are causing this? A delegate demanded. We are saying correlation suggests causation, Jiwon replied, but we don't have proof. We only have data and growing concern. Captain Minseo stepped forward. We are willing to help. We can share our research, our techniques for detecting breaches, our protocols for moving safely in affected areas, but you must accept that some systems, including ours, are too dangerous for normal traffic. The warnings must be respected. The Consul began debating immediately. Some called for Q. The Consul ignored Earth's warning. Now every armada that entered is gone. The emergency session of the Galactic Consul lasted 14 hours. Representatives shouted over each other in languages that made translation devices spark and overheat. The first Armada's survivors had returned with their horror stories, but the evidence was impossible to verify. Ships had vanished, yes, but the testimonies of traumatized crew members were not enough to convince hardened politicians and military leaders that an invisible threat lurked in Sol system. Consul Director Vexthorian stood before the assembly, his scales dark with anger and embarrassment. The loss of 147 ships was a disaster, but admitting that humanity had been telling the truth was unthinkable. He would lose his position, his species would lose face. The entire power structure of the Consul would be questioned. We must respond with strength, Vexthorian declared. The first Armada was clearly sabotaged. Humanity has weapons we do not yet understand. They lured our ships into a trap and used some form of advanced technology to destroy them. Ambassador Hyunwoo sat in his chair, listening to the accusations with a tired expression. He had not slept in 3 days. Reports from Neptune Station described the exact manner of the ship's disappearance, and he had read every word. It was worse than the previous incidents. The breaches were becoming more active, more responsive to threats. When Vexthorian finally allowed him to speak, Hyunwoo stood slowly. He looked older than he had just weeks ago, as if the weight of the lost lives had aged him. We did not sabotage your fleet. We did not attack them. We warned you, and you ignored that warning. Now thousands are dead, and you want to send more? You will submit to Consul inspection, Vexthorian demanded. You will allow our scientists to enter your system under escort and study whatever weapons you have deployed. We have no weapons, Hyunwoo said flatly. What destroyed your ships is not something we built. It is not something we control. It is simply there, part of the fabric of space in our system, and we have learned to live with it. You cannot inspect it. You cannot study it safely. And if you send another armada, more people will die. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Hyunwoo sat down and closed his eyes. He had tried. Again and again. They would not listen. War Master Krelthok stepped forward, his massive armored form dominating the speaking platform. He was a legend among the Consul military, a veteran of 40 campaigns across 3 decades. He had fought pirates, rebels, and hostile alien species. He had never lost a battle. His voice was like grinding stone when he spoke. I will lead the second Armada, Krelthok announced. We will enter Sol system with full defensive protocols and advanced sensor arrays. If there is a spatial phenomenon, we will detect it. If there are hidden weapons, we will find them. And if humanity has been lying to us, we will have our answers. The Consul voted. The decision was nearly unanimous. Within 2 weeks, a second fleet would launch toward Earth. This one would be larger, better equipped, and led by the most experienced commander in the galaxy. Hyunwoo left the chamber without speaking to anyone. He transmitted a priority message to Earth. They were coming again. Prepare to record everything. On a maintenance station orbiting Saturn, a man named Tae-hyun finished his shift and floated to the observation deck with his dinner. He was 28 years old and had spent his entire life in space. He had been born on Mars, raised on Luna, and now worked in the outer system keeping automated mining equipment functional. It was quiet work, lonely work, but he liked it. He ate his meal while watching Saturn's rings shimmer in the distant sunlight. The view never got old. Then his communicator buzzed with an alert. Another armada was coming, bigger than the first. Tae-hyun sighed and felt a familiar sadness settle in his chest. He would watch more people die, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. On Earth, in a secure facility beneath Seoul, Dr. Ji-won studied the latest data from the first Armada's disappearance. She was part of a classified research team that had been studying the breaches for 15 years. She understood them better than almost anyone, which meant she understood how little humanity actually knew. The breaches were not weapons. They were not creatures. They were more like wounds in the structure of space-time itself. Something on the other side pressed against reality, and in certain locations, reality was thin enough for it to push through. Sol System sat on one of those thin spots, and humanity had stumbled into it like children finding a tiger's den. The rules they had learned were simple. Belong to the system, move with calm intent, keep energy signatures low, Objects that were native to Sol system could move freely. The breaches ignored them. But foreign objects, especially ones that entered with aggressive intentions or high energy outputs, triggered a response. The breaches opened wider. Things came through. People vanished. Ji-Wan wrote her report knowing it would make no difference. The Consul would not believe her. They would send their armada and more people would die, and humanity would be blamed. The second armada assembled in orbit above Vex Prime. 500 warships this time, each equipped with experimental sensors designed to detect spatial anomalies, quantum fluctuations, and dimensional tears. War Master Krelthok reviewed every system personally. He had studied the first armada's sensor logs, examined every second of data before the ships vanished. He believed he understood the threat now. Humanity had somehow weaponized local space, perhaps using ancient technology they had discovered. He would be ready. The fleet launched on schedule, jumping to faster than light and crossing the void toward Sol system. Aboard the flagship Unbreakable, Krelthok stood on the bridge and felt the familiar calm of pre-battle focus. He had faced worse odds before. This was just another mission. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Sol system, far beyond where the first armada had entered. Krelthok ordered maximum dispersion, spreading his ships across 1 billion cubic kilometers of space. No tight formations this time. No clustered targets. The fleet moved inward slowly, sensors active and recording everything. They detected the spatial anomalies almost immediately. The new equipment worked perfectly. On every ship's display, small tears in space-time appeared as red warnings. They looked like nothing on visual spectrum, just faint distortions like heat shimmer over summer pavement. But the sensors showed them clearly, pulsing with unknown energy. Interesting, Krelthok murmured. Maintain distance from the anomalies. Navigation, plot a course that avoids all detected distortions. The fleet adjusted course, threading carefully between the tiers in space. It seemed to work. They passed the Kuiper Belt without incident. Past Neptune, past Uranus. The anomalies were there, but they remained stable, not expanding or moving. Krelthok allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans had not lied about the spatial phenomenon, but it was avoidable with proper detection and careful navigation. On Neptune Station, Commander Daejung watched the Armada's approach with growing dread. They were being careful this time, avoiding the breaches they could detect. But Daejung knew something the aliens did not. The breaches they could see were not the dangerous ones. The dangerous ones opened in response to threat patterns, appearing where there had been nothing seconds before. The second Armada reached Jupiter's orbit, and Krelthok ordered a temporary halt to review sensor data. His science teams reported the anomalies were stable but numerous. There were thousands of small tears scattered throughout the inner system. Moving between them required precision, but it was manageable. Prepare to advance to Mars orbit, Krelthok ordered. All ships maintained current dispersion and the sensors screamed warnings. New tiers were opening, dozens of them, hundreds, surrounding the fleet in every direction. These were not small distortions. These were massive ruptures in space-time itself, spreading like cracks in breaking glass. Emergency retreat, Krelthok shouted. All ships initiate faster-than-light jump immediately. But it was too late. The tiers expanded faster than the ships could react. The flagship Unbreakable was pulled sideways into a spatial rift, and Krelthok had one moment to see something impossible. Space folding in on itself. Angles that should not exist. Colors his brain could not process. Then everything went dark. Ships throughout the fleet suffered different fates. Some were pulled into the tiers and vanished completely. Others emerged from different rifts but changed. The heavy cruiser Stalwart appeared split into 3 identical versions of itself, each one real, each one broadcasting the same distress call on the same frequency. The destroyer Swift Shadow emerged aged by centuries, its hull covered in corrosion and its crew long dead, mummified in their stations. War Master Krelthok found himself standing on the bridge of the Unbreakable again, but everything was wrong. His crew was there, moving and speaking, but their movements repeated in perfect loops. The same gesture, the same words, over and over. He tried to move and found he could, but his crew could not see him, could not hear him. He was a ghost in his own ship. He watched in horror as the bridge repeated the moment of the attack endlessly. Saw himself shout the order to retreat. Saw his crew reach for controls. Saw the spatial tear open, again. The Consul ignored Earth's warning. Now every armada that entered is gone. The orbital station hung above Vega Prime like a crown of metal and glass. Inside its largest chamber, representatives from 15 different species gathered around a circular table that glowed with holographic displays. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert hundreds of languages into coherent meaning. This was the Galactic Consul, and today they had gathered to discuss what they called the human problem. Ambassador Hyun-woo sat in his designated chair, his hands folded calmly on the table before him. He was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many diplomatic failures. He wore a simple black suit, outdated by galactic standards, but he wore it with quiet dignity. Around him, the other representatives whispered and gestured, their various appendages clicking, rustling, or tapping with impatience. Consul Director Vexus Thorian called the session to order. He was a massive reptilian creature, with scales that shimmered green and gold under the chamber lights. His species had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 3,000 years, and he carried that authority in every movement. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonated through the translation speakers. "We are here to address Earth's recent broadcasts," Vexus Thorian announced. "For 3 cycles, humanity has been transmitting the same message across all frequencies. Ambassador Hyun-woo, would you care to explain your species' threats?" Hyun-woo stood slowly. He activated his personal display, and the message appeared in the air above the table for all to see. The words were simple and direct. "Do not enter Sol system with hostile intent. You will not leave." "It is not a threat," Hyun-woo said quietly. "It is a warning." "There is a difference." Laughter rippled through the chamber. A delegate with crystalline features made a sound like breaking glass, which the translator rendered as amusement. Another representative, a floating jellyfish-like being, pulsed with colors that indicated mockery. Vexathorian raised one clawed hand for silence. "Ambassador, humanity has been traveling in space for barely 200 of your years. You have no faster-than-light weapons. Your shields are primitive. You have no planet crackers, no quantum disruptors, no singularity bombs. Yet you warn the entire galaxy to stay away from your system?" He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What could you possibly have that would make such a warning necessary?" Hyun-woo remained calm. He had expected this reaction. He pulled up another display, this one showing a list of vessel names and dates. 14 scout ships have entered Sol system in the past year. All of them conducted aggressive scans of our planets and stations. All of them had weapon systems active. He paused, looking around the chamber. None of them returned to their home ports. The chamber fell silent. Vexthorian studied the list, his expression unreadable. "Mechanical failures. Navigation errors. You expect us to believe that 14 separate vessels from 7 different species all experienced fatal malfunctions in your system?" "I expect you to believe the evidence," Hyun-woo replied. "We have recovered some debris. We have sensor logs. The ships entered our system, and then they simply stopped existing. No distress calls. No wreckage patterns consistent with weapons fire or collisions. They were there, and then they were not." A delegate from the Merchant Coalition spoke up, her voice sharp. "Perhaps humanity is more advanced than they appear. Perhaps these warnings are meant to hide weapons tests." Hyun-woo shook his head. "We have nothing to hide and everything to protect. We sent detailed data packets with our warnings, sensor readings, spatial anomaly reports, incident logs. Everything. We have been completely transparent because we want you to understand. Sol system is dangerous, but not because of anything we built." "Then what?" Vexathorian demanded. "What destroys ships without leaving evidence? What threat could exist that humanity somehow survives while advanced vessels cannot?" "That is what we have been trying to explain," Hyun-woo said. "But you must understand, we did not create this danger. We discovered it. We learned to live with it. And we are trying to prevent you from making a terrible mistake." Vexathorian rose from his seat, his full height dominating the chamber. "Enough. The Consul has been patient with Earth's isolationist tendencies. We have allowed you to refuse trade agreements, to deny passage through your system, to remain outside our collective defense networks. But this," he gestured at the warning message, "this is insolence. This is a primitive species attempting to dictate terms to civilizations that mastered space travel before your ancestors learned to make fire." Hyun-woo felt a cold weight settle in his chest. He had known this moment might come, but he had hoped reason would prevail. "What are you proposing?" A demonstration, Vexithorian said flatly. A fleet will enter your system. Not to attack initially, simply to prove that your warnings are baseless. If your mysterious danger is real, our fleet will be prepared. If it is not, then Earth will accept Consul authority and cease these ridiculous broadcasts. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. Hyunwoo looked around at the assembled representatives and saw the decision had already been made. They saw humanity as backward children claiming to own the stars. They could not allow such a precedent. How large a fleet? Hyunwoo asked quietly. 300 warships, Vexithorian answered. More than enough to handle any threat, natural or artificial. We will enter your system, conduct our surveys, and depart, and you will transmit an apology to the entire galaxy for wasting our time. Hyunwoo gathered his documents slowly. He looked up at Vexithorian, and for a moment the Consul director saw something in the human's eyes that made him uncomfortable. It was not fear or anger. It was sadness. Deep, profound sadness. We gave you the truth, Hyunwoo said softly. We gave you data, evidence, and honest warning. What happens next is your responsibility, not ours. He straightened his jacket and walked toward the chamber exit. At the doorway, he paused and looked back. I hope your crews have families who will remember them well. Then he left, and the chamber doors sealed behind him with a hiss of pressurized air. Vexithorian watched the human go, feeling a flicker of doubt that he quickly suppressed. Humans were known for psychological warfare. This was clearly an attempt to frighten the Consul into backing down. He would not fall for such primitive tactics. Prepare the fleet, he ordered. We launch in 2 days. Across the station in a small human observation post, Commander Dae-jung received a priority message from Ambassador Hyunwoo. He read it twice, then closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. His hand moved to a communication panel. All stations, this is Neptune Command, he transmitted. Update defensive protocols to observation-only status. Record everything. And someone send a message to Earth. Tell them the Consul is coming. In the launch bays of Vexithorian's flagship, 300 warships began their final preparations. Crews loaded weapons, calibrated shields, and ran diagnostics on faster-than-light engines. They joked about the easy mission ahead. Some placed bets on how quickly the humans would surrender once they saw the fleet's power. None of them noticed the small human monitoring probe that drifted past their formation, its passive sensors recording everything. And none of them could have known that their names would soon be added to a list that Ambassador Hyunwoo kept in a locked file. A list he prayed would never grow longer. But it would. It always did. The first Armada launched toward Sol System 3 days later, their ships gleaming against the stars, confident and proud. Behind them, Ambassador Hyunwoo stood at a viewport and watched them go, his reflection ghost-like in the transparent metal. I tried, he whispered to no one. God help me, I tried. The Consul ignored Earth's warning. Now every Armada that entered is gone. The first Armada crossed into Sol System's outer boundary on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. The transition was smooth and unremarkable. 300 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls barely warm from the journey. They had covered 20 light-years in 3 days, a journey that would have taken humanity's fastest ships nearly a century. Fleet Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominator. His forearms crossed in a gesture of satisfaction. His species, the Valorians, had fought in 60 campaigns across the galaxy. They knew war. They knew power. This mission, however, felt more like a parade than a military operation. Status report, Cross ordered, his voice harsh through the translation system. All ships reporting ready status, his tactical officer replied. No hostile contacts. No weapons platforms detected, sir. Sensors are showing minimal defensive presence. Just monitoring stations and civilian mining operations. Cross felt his confidence grow. The humans had been bluffing. Their warnings were nothing more than desperate attempts to seem more powerful than they were. He activated the fleet-wide channel. All ships maintain formation. Weapons remain cold but ready. We will proceed to the inner system and conduct our survey. Any human vessels that approach will be warned away but not engaged unless they fire first. The Armada moved forward, passing the Kuiper Belt without incident. Small human monitoring stations tracked their progress but made no attempt to interfere. Cross noted this with approval. At least the humans were smart enough not to provoke a fight they could not win. On Neptune Station, Commander Dae-jung watched the Armada's approach on three-dimensional holographic displays. The station was small, barely large enough for a crew of 50. It hung in high orbit above Neptune, a collection of modules connected by pressurized tunnels. It had no weapons. Its only purpose was observation and early warning. Ensign Sojin stood beside him, her hands gripping the edge of the console. She was young, barely 23, fresh from the academy. This was her first real posting, and she had never seen an alien warship in person, let alone 300 of them. "Commander," she said, her voice tight with nerves, "should we transmit a warning? They're entering the outer marker zone." Dae-jung shook his head slowly. He was older, perhaps 50, with gray streaks in his black hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "They've already been warned. Multiple times. Transmitting again won't change anything." "Then what do we do?" Sojin asked. "Do we engage? Do we evacuate?" "We record everything," Dae-jung said quietly. "That's our job. We watch, we document, and we make sure someone remembers what happened here." He turned to look at her, and his expression was sad. "And we pray they turn back before it's too late." Sojin wanted to ask more questions, but something in the commander's tone made her stay silent. She had heard rumors, of course. Every human in the outer system had heard the stories. But she had always thought they were exaggerations. Ghost stories told to make their boring posts seem more important. The Armada continued its advance. They passed Uranus without incident, then Saturn, its rings glittering in the distant sunlight. The alien crews began to relax. Some started composing messages home, describing the primitive human system and their easy mission. Officers made jokes about collecting hazard pay for what was essentially a sightseeing tour. Fleet Admiral Cross reviewed the sensor data from Jupiter's moons. The gas giant was massive and beautiful, but there was nothing threatening about it. No hidden weapon platforms, no cloaked fleets, just rocks and ice and the natural chaos of a planetary system. He began composing his report to the Consul. The humans had nothing. Their warnings were hollow. As the Armada passed Jupiter's orbit, Cross ordered the formation to tighten for the final approach to Earth and Mars. The ships moved closer together, their shields overlapping to create a defensive wall that could withstand almost any conventional attack. It was standard military procedure, textbook perfect. The flagship's sensors registered a minor spatial fluctuation. The science officer noted it in the log but classified it as insignificant, probably interference from Jupiter's massive magnetic field. 3 seconds later, the flagship vanished. One moment it was there, a massive dreadnought-class vessel bristling with weapons and carrying 12,000 crew. The next moment, the space it had occupied was simply empty. No explosion, no energy discharge, no debris field. The ship had ceased to exist. Chaos erupted across the fleet channels. Captains shouted for status reports. Tactical officers searched for enemies, for weapon signatures, for anything that could explain what had just happened. Another ship disappeared. Then another. Then 12 more in the span of 5 seconds. The acting fleet commander, now aboard the heavy cruiser Relentless, ordered emergency faster-than-light retreat. Half the fleet managed to initiate their jump drives before they disappeared. They vanished in flashes of distorted light, escaping back to interstellar space. The other half, 147 vessels, simply stopped existing. Between one sensor sweep and the next, they were gone. The silence that followed was terrible. The surviving ships regrouped 3 light-years from Sol's system, their crews in shock. Medical bays filled with personnel suffering panic attacks. Officers stared at their displays, unable to process what they had witnessed. Entire ships, tens of thousands of people erased from existence in seconds. But then the sensors picked up something impossible. Life signs. The missing crews were registering on scanners, but they were aboard the surviving ships now, in cargo bays and corridors and empty rooms. People who had been on the lost vessels were suddenly here, confused and screaming. Medical teams rushed to help them, but something was wrong. Some crew members were catatonic, staring at nothing with wide, unseeing eyes. Others spoke in broken sentences about places that should not exist. They described seeing spaces between spaces, angles that bent in directions the mind could not follow, colors that had no names. One Valorian officer, found curled in a storage locker, kept repeating the same phrase over and over. "The dark is hungry. The dark is awake. We woke it up. The ship's chief medical officer examined the survivors and found nothing physically wrong. No injuries, no radiation exposure, no signs of chemical or biological attack. But their minds were shattered. Some would never speak again. Others would wake screaming every night for the rest of their lives. On Neptune Station, Commander Dae-jung watched the fleet's retreat with sad, knowing eyes. Ensign Sojin stood beside him, her face pale. She had watched 147 ships simply stop existing on her display. No explosions. No battles. Just there one moment and gone the next. What happened to them? She whispered. Dae-jung was quiet for a long moment. They entered with weapons ready and shields raised. They came here looking like a threat. He turned to her, and something that lives in the spaces we can't see responded to that threat. But what is it? What could do that? We don't know, Dae-jung admitted. We call them breaches. Tears in reality. We found them 50 years ago when we first started exploring deep space in this system. We lost 30,000 people before we learned the rules. He looked back at the display where the remaining alien ships were limping away. Stay small, move slow. Don't look like prey, and never ever come here ready for war. Sojin felt her legs weaken and she sat down hard in her chair. The warning. The ambassador tried to tell them. He tried, Dae-jung agreed, but they didn't listen. They thought we were primitive and afraid. They couldn't imagine that we were trying to protect them. In the cargo bay of the cruiser Relentless, a surviving officer activated his personal recorder. His hands shook as he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. The recording would eventually reach the Consul, though no one would believe it at first. They didn't destroy us, the officer said, his eyes reflecting horrors only he could see. They showed us what's waiting in the dark. And it's been waiting for them, not us. The humans know. God help us all, the humans know, and they tried to warn us. The recording clicked off. The officer sat in the darkness of the cargo bay, rocking slowly back and forth, seeing angles that should not exist every time he closed his eyes. 3 light years away, the first Armada survivors prepared for the long journey home, carrying with them the knowledge that humanity's warning had not been a bluff. It had been mercy, but the Consul would not believe them. Not yet. Pride and fear would demand answers, and those answers would require another Armada, larger and better prepared than the first. The warnings had been ignored once. They would be ignored again. And the dark spaces between reality waited, patient and endless, for the next ships to arrive.